Right, I've just turned the camera on and I don't even know where to start, to be honest. Yesterday was the lowest ebb I think we've ever had in my life as a Tottenham Hotspur fan. I've been supporting Spurs since 2004. I've been going since then. I'm just turned 28 and this is as bad as it's ever got. And I know there might be people that have seen us get relegated in the 70s. That's kind of all I was hearing yesterday from my old man, who was saying, oh, this is the worst Tottenham team I've seen since 77. And that is actually when we went down, and he said that there were remarkably similar hallmarks to that. So if anybody's watching this video that was alive to see that, then please give me your thoughts on that in the comments. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel as well, please. That would be massively helpful, and please get involved in the comments and just give your thoughts on what yesterday was the lowest I've felt and seen, really. Obviously, we've had terrible moments that have felt like a kick in the balls and a gut punch, like, you know, when we finished third in the two-horse race and all that, and lost the Champions League final, and, you know, lost the FA Cup semi-final to Chelsea. But when you think about where we were at those points and how low you felt, it's only, you feel low because you're sad and disappointed, but there was always that feeling of, we can go again. There's something seriously kind of special building here. So there was always that. Once you got over it after a couple of days and could live with it, there was always that light at the end of the tunnel that you always thought that we were going to get better, and this just isn't the case. Thomas Frank, apparently, he's on very thin ice. There's been multiple reports that have come out last night and today saying that his sacking could potentially be imminent. Varying conflicting reports about the Borussia Dortmund game on Tuesday. So we will just see. But apparently he's under massive pressure now, and I think it's absolutely justified. I'm sad that it's not worked out. I was big on Frank in the summer. I thought he was the right kind of guy to give us a bit more stability, but also for him to kind of, I thought he would scale up as a coach a lot better than he has. I thought, you know, in terms of what we've seen in his management game at various points throughout his career in the Championship and in the Premier League with Brentford, that I think he'll be able to tackle this situation a lot better than he has, not just with the off-the-pitch stuff, but also on the pitch, and making us a more exciting, better footballing team. I think it says everything that we were able to make West Ham, who have probably been the most toxic team in the Premier League so far this season because of how badly they are run off the pitch, their fans in total disbelief at what is going on, you know, this feeling that over the last few years that this relegation battle for them, more serious relegation battle, was inevitable. But we've given them a lifeline, and I think and simultaneously we have dragged ourselves back into it. 10 points is not a big gap when you're as bad as we are on a weekly basis, and when you've given the one team that actually has any hope of getting out of it the impetus and the shot in the arm that a last-minute winner against one of your biggest rivals can give you. And they will feel more confidence now. They'll stand a little bit taller. They'll puff their chest out this morning, West Ham fans, and they'll look at 10 points and think, oh, it's going to be tough, but they'll believe. And I don't think they believed before. If Wolves or Burnley, who have got no hope of getting out of this, came to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium yesterday, and I think this is where the bar is, and this is how far the standards have slipped. If they'd had come and played yesterday like West Ham did and shown the confidence that West Ham did, then I would have been less surprised, because despite the fact that those two teams I think are worse than West Ham, and obviously the Premier League table will reflect that, the fact that they are so clearly getting relegated, you'd understand that they'd come and play with a little bit more freedom. West Ham weren't cagey yesterday, really. We invited them onto us for the goal. Obviously, the goal comes from a kind of a break in midfield. Ben Davies with the foul, and then it breaks. And I'm absolutely gutted for Ben Davies on a side note yesterday, because that looks like his Tottenham career is very much done, and he's been an incredible servant to the football club. So I hope he recovers in the best way possible. It's still not been confirmed what his injury is. Potentially, I think it was an ankle break. Someone that I go to Spurs with, actually, their friend, who I've actually been on holiday to Benidorm with, weirdly, was the paramedic who went on the pitch and put Davis on the stretcher yesterday, and I think they suspected a fractured ankle, so it's not great. But when it breaks to Somerville, how many times have we seen that sort of goal for Spurs? Not necessarily just in that way, but where we'll just back off and try and protect the box and overload the box without thinking that there is so much quality in this Premier League that players can shoot from outside the box and score, whether it takes a deflection like it did yesterday or not. You know, the way that we set up is causing these kind of goals. It's been a consistent theme throughout the season, really, and Porro getting done, Gallagher not really doing enough either there. It might have been, to be honest, I've not watched the game back. I don't have the energy to watch that game back. I just kind of want to give my thoughts on the managerial situation, but it's so bad. And we gave West Ham a lift. West Ham generated more XG in the first half yesterday than they've generated in any Premier League away game since August. That tells you everything that you need to know. There are so many things, really, that I think from yesterday that kind of tell you everything that you need to know. I think One of them is that Yves Bissouma, who I made a video on TikTok about on Friday when there was the chat about him potentially coming back into the squad and getting involved in these things. And I was like, well, look, I totally agreed with Frank freezing Bissouma out, despite the fact that I've always believed that there is a player in Yves Bissouma. And I think it maybe, I know we've got injuries a lot, but I think Frank's, it does, maybe I'm being harsh, but it does leave you with questions about Frank's kind of backbone, that he was just like, right, we need you now. Yeah, you're going to come back in. It says a lot that Yves Bissouma was probably the best player on the pitch for Tottenham in that second half yesterday, and he's been the one that's not been coached by Thomas Frank all season. That tells you everything you need to know. I think Romero coming out and doing the interview after the game with Spurs in full English, and his reaction compared to Thomas Frank's reaction tells you everything you need to know. Romero coming out and saying that it was a disaster. Thomas Frank coming out and saying that if anybody watched that game, you can see how close we were to winning it 2-1. I think Tottenham had 2 shots on target in the second half off the top of my head. I'll be honest, the games feel like a bit of a blur at the moment. So if I've missed one, I remember Bassouma's shot that was tipped over the bar by Areola when we were just starting to build up a bit of momentum. And Javi Simmons in the last 10 minutes of the game forced Areola into a good save as well from the edge of the box. We didn't really create anything of substantial quality, really. We got down the left-hand side in the first, I think it was at 1-0 when Odegaard and Spence had that chance in the first half that forced Areola into a save that we could have scored from, but it was really, really poor. And the players have got to look at themselves yesterday as well. I thought Javi Simmons, who is someone that I really like and I've stuck up for a lot, I thought he was really poor off the back of what was one of his best games in a Spurs shirt against Aston Villa last week. Whereas this week, it was every pass was overhit. I thought he was actually getting into quite good areas. And there were moments where Gray would play a lovely slide roll through ball into the middle of the pitch, or would be able to open them up, and then it would come to Simmons and then he'd just get the next action wrong or overhit the pass. And it just showed you, one, that it was quite easy actually to open up this West Ham team at points, despite the fact they played with fight, spirit and character yesterday. And also, like in the second half, their arses were going a little bit when we scored. But the lack of quality in the final third wasn't there. But the one player, and this is where I come back to Frank, that I think was showing drive, impetus, energy, belief, confidence in their own game yesterday was Matisse Tell. And once again, Thomas Frank takes him off. And he was not happy with that substitution to Matisse Tell. He did exactly the same thing against Aston Villa, where Spurs build up a head of steam, would get back into the game, we go to 2-1. Tell is a key part of that. He shows confidence. He wants to cut inside and have shots. Through everything that Matisse Tell has been through this season, with the racial abuse after the Super Cup final penalty miss, through being left out of the Champions League squad, through not being given consistent opportunities off the back of good performances and good... And let's be honest, it has been moments with Tell, obviously, but, you know, I've seen more to believe in him than believe in Thomas Frank. Do you know what I mean? I know it's obviously different, but as a player compared to a manager, there is something there. There is 100% something there. And as we're building up ahead of steam, you take Tell off last week, you bring Solanke on, you bring Scarlett on as well when you take Odegaard off, you chuck 3 strikers up there, you play Scarlett out of position on the wing, you lose all your structure, all of that pressure that you've built up, and the same thing happened yesterday. 2 up front with Mawani and Solanke. I can't believe Mawani stayed on the pitch, by the way, because I thought he was decent against Aston Villa. I think he's shown moments in some of the Champions League games, and obviously scores against PSG with that brace, but he just doesn't look interested whatsoever. And Tell does. He really does. Bear in mind, he wants to leave and push for first team football and get regular minutes. He wants to play. He wants to contribute while he's here. And you take him off, you move Javi Simmons over to the left-hand side, which, like I said, Javi was not having a good game. But all of that structure, you kind of lose. And it says a lot, again, that Romero is the one. From him gambling, going up front to get the equalising goal, again, that goal comes from a player standing up in a big moment. There is character in this team. There is, but I think for the most part, I'm not sure I want to be dragged into a relegation battle with this team and this manager, mainly this manager. And the thing is with Romero, it's slightly starting to irritate me because it does disarm our structure, it does disable that structure, which I don't believe in that much anyway in terms of what we're actually trying to do in terms of attacking patterns and all that. But Romero going up there, at least, you know, he's up for the fight. He is up for the fight and he scores the goal. He did it against Newcastle as well. Like, I think him and Van der Ven have scored more goals combined than any of our strikers this season. So yeah, but that again, that substitution said so much to me. Taking Tell off, we sat in a mid block and kind of just soaked up pressure in that first half against West Ham. That's just not acceptable to me. The way that we're playing, I know there's so much said about the United DNA and all that kind of stuff around Manchester United and obviously I think Ange, what's the word, sort of really embraced that. And again, I don't want to do Ange revisionism. And people who come at me for saying that this is what you wanted Ange out. It's like, well, I think that doesn't mean that I should be held accountable for what's happened at the football club. But I do understand your point that, we could have given Ange season 3 and all that kind of stuff. If you were of that opinion, then that's totally fair enough. I was sad to see Ange go, but I thought this was kind of the right move that we needed to make, and it was wrong, and I can hold my hands up with that. But I don't think Frank is embracing that Tottenham DNA in the same way, sadly. And I thought he would do it a lot better. I think there was a lot of things that pointed towards him wanting to do that, but unfortunately there are a lot of empty words that came with the stuff that he said in the summer. Want to be brave, aggressive, play attacking football, that kind of stuff. And it was, in hindsight, obviously the wrong appointment. And I think that obviously the board came out, or their kind of press briefing this week before they came out with that statement in the programme on Friday before the game, or Saturday morning before the game, sorry, was that Thomas Frank's position is reviewed on a regular basis. Obviously, they're checking in with him and all that kind of stuff. But for now, his job is safe, and actually the West Ham result of the weekend or performance actually won't do anything to make them change from that position or stance. And I said in a TikTok video on Friday that I'd kind of checked out of the Frank in, Frank out debate because it was quite clear that he was getting the season. I said in that video that I do think that, however, is unacceptable, because if you lose to West Ham, 18th place West Ham, you not only drag yourselves into a relegation battle, but the optics of that are just absolutely horrendous. And how can you come out and say that his job is under no real threat if that happens? So yeah, that absolutely amazes me, to be honest. And then obviously the words come out in the programme from Vinay in the morning. Again, a lot of good words in there, talking about like we need to be more ambitious, we need to bring in better quality players, we need to get better at selling, all that kind of stuff. We need to break our wage structure to be able to attract the best players that are going to move the needle. But also, we've heard it all before. Like, the proof will be in the pudding with that. And if they go and sack Thomas Frank and whoever they go and get in, then they need to make sure that they get the right guy and do that with them. Whoever that is, I don't know. But I'm sure we'll talk about that this week, because I think whoever comes in next, if Frank is sacked today or tomorrow, it will be an interim manager. I don't think we'll get the guy who they want to take us forward with for now. So, I'll be doing videos and stuff, kind of ranking potential new Spurs managers and all that. So make sure to subscribe for that, and let me know your thoughts in the comments as well as to who you want. But I think Vinay, and this is a point that I made yesterday, I think one of the reasons that Vinay has given Thomas Frank the time throughout the course of the last month or so, or 2 months, is because he was at Arsenal and obviously saw the... And I'm not saying that Frank definitely should have been sacked in November or anything like that. You do have to give managers time to an extent and see it through, but we've not seen any green shoots, anything whatsoever over the course of the last couple of months. And the match-going fans, like myself and everyone else in that stadium yesterday, and, I was at Brentford away, Palace away, Brentford away especially, was obviously where it got very toxic. The match-going fans' voice absolutely matters, and people made that voice incredibly... heard yesterday and obviously at Brentford with the boos towards the manager, you're getting sacked in the morning, all that kind of stuff. I think one of the reasons that Vinay has obviously stood by Thomas Frank is that he was at Arsenal with the early Arteta years, and I think that despite the fact that Arsenal were never as bad as this, and I know it's a tougher league now, it's probably more competitive and all that kind of stuff, so there is context to it, obviously. And maybe if Arsenal were kind of plonked it... Well, I say Arsenal weren't this bad. Like, I'm pretty sure when we beat them in that North London derby in that second season of Arteta, after they won the FA Cup, they were like lingering around the relegation zone, weren't they? I'm pretty sure. So they were kind of this bad at points. And obviously the online discourse around that, because it was COVID, from those fans, there was a lot of, we want Arteta out, this ain't going to work, blah, 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 blah. And Vinay stuck by him, and Arsenal stuck by him. And I think that it's much easier to do that when you're playing in empty stadiums for a year and a half, when you haven't got that real fan pressure. And I'm not saying that fans' voices on social media don't count, because obviously those match-going fans would have added to that voice as well because they weren't able to go. But there's no way that you can't listen to what the fans were saying yesterday. If we're singing there, you're getting sacked in the morning to your own manager, I think that's when you know your position is untenable. Brentford away again, I think they should have listened and maybe made this decision earlier. we're out of the cup, our season's over. I think it'd be mathematically very hard for us to not get through to the Champions League playoffs. But again, we're not going to go anywhere in that. This season's objective now is about keeping our heads above water. And I think with this manager, I don't think he's shown anything or instilled any confidence in the fan base for him to be able to do that. Because obviously, also, if you are in that situation, you need everybody aligned and everybody on the same page. And that's certainly not the case right now. And obviously, it's different when you, say if you're a team that comes up and you're trying to fight for survival, naturally that manager's going to be afforded more time and everyone's going to be on the same page because that is your objective at the start of the season. Tottenham's objective at the start of the season would have been to try and get back into the Champions League, through the league, and or at least get back into the European places and finish higher than the 17th. We might still do that, but it might, at this rate, it's probably only going to be 16th, 15th. And I think there is greater danger of us getting actually sucked into a relegation battle this year than there was last year, because last year you had Ipswich, Leicester and Southampton, who were so clearly the worst three teams in the league, whereas now it's, it only takes one team like Sunderland, for example, to kind of break away from those other three newly promoted teams, and then that means there will be a better side, a more established Premier League side that will get dragged into it. That has been West Ham because of how much they have consistently failed off the pitch. And I said yesterday as well that I don't think this fixture has actually come at a better time to kind of put into spotlight and into focus the mismanagement and failings off the pitch of both football clubs that have got them into this mess and got them into this position that they're both in now. And if we don't go down this year, there is obviously every danger that we could become West Ham. We could. I think a few people made good points about the fact that I think if Levy was still here, Frank probably would have been sacked by now, and I do probably agree with that. I'm not saying that we should get Levy back. I don't want to do Levy revisionism because he held this club back in a lot of ways, but I do think, and it's one thing that I've said in the past, is I don't think people should have been necessarily jumping for joy and celebrating Levy leaving the football club until we saw what was then to come. Because I think Levy had Spurs' best interests at heart, despite the fact that he held us back massively. Like, two things can be true, and I think he probably would have made this decision earlier. Who knows where we're going to go from here? Who knows who we're going to get? But I think the club, I think they will, and I think they absolutely have to kind of buckle under the fan pressure, really. But it also kind of makes a mockery a little bit of their alignment on Thomas Frank. That's cool. All we've been hearing, that Frank, Vinay and Langer are very aligned, and obviously big statements being made in the programme and all that kind of stuff. But again, that feels so reactive to Romero's comments, and that feels so reactive to the Change for Tottenham protest that they know were planned for yesterday as well. So it's an absolute mess. It's not all on Thomas Frank. These players have got to have a big look at themselves as well, but I just don't see it getting any better with Frank at the helm, and I think it will be an interim. Thankfully, touch wood, I don't think it's going to be Oliver Glasner, because I think despite Glasner's best efforts to try and get himself sacked, I think Palace want him to see that contract through, and I think we'd be in a very similar situation. I think Glasner would probably keep us up, but I wouldn't want him as our permanent manager. I don't know what I want. I want to feel something again. Maybe, people. I don't like this point scoring and all this stuff over Postecoglou. If people think that we were wrong to get rid of him and want to point out fans that wanted Frank, then you do you. That's fair enough. Maybe we wouldn't be in this situation. We'd certainly be playing more exciting football, obviously, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't be in another relegation battle. I honestly don't know. You can't predict the future. Nobody really knows. But we don't have a manager. We don't have a manager that is embodying that kind of Tottenham DNA, despite all the words in the summer, and he's dragging us towards relegation, which is a very scary place to be. Yesterday was dark, it was miserable, and under this manager, I don't see it getting any better. Did I have anything else to say? I'm trying to look back through some. When I came home yesterday, I was just like, I can't jump on any content. I just can't. It's so draining. And I just wanted to enjoy a night without making myself more miserable. But yeah, Romero coming out and saying that it was a disaster. Frank saying we were close to something very good. I don't know what evidence is there to support that kind of theory. And I just think when you're as bad as we are, and with the impotence and confidence that we've given West Ham, 10 points is not that big a gap. And I really do worry about what's going to happen for Tottenham. I will react to the news when he is gone, if he is gone, whatever happens, and there'll be a lot of content this week about who that potential new manager could be. So get your thoughts in the comments, what you want to see from me, your thoughts on this whole situation. It's grim, it's dark, and I'm worried. So, and I'm sure you guys are as well. So we'll see what happens. I'll see you in the next video. Nice one.